What if the man you loved with all your heart was secretly plotting to destroy you? What if one moment of betrayal could erase years of hard work and success? What if the only way to save yourself was to confront the truth you had been hiding from the world? The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Lorenzo's penthouse in Manhattan, casting a golden glow over the sleek modern furniture that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Lorenzo Harrington, the 35-year-old CEO of Harrington Real Estate, one of the largest development firms in New York, sipped his coffee while scrolling through his phone. He was the picture of success, tall, broad-shouldered, with a sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes that commanded respect in boardrooms across the city. His tailored suits, private jet, and penthouse overlooking Central Park all screamed power. But behind the polished exterior, Lorenzo harbored a secret that could topple his empire if revealed. For 3 years, he had been in a passionate yet hidden relationship with Daniel Reyes, a 28-year-old freelance photographer with boyish charm, dark curly hair, and warm brown eyes that could melt the coldest heart. They had met at a charity gala where Daniel was hired to capture the event. Lorenzo was immediately drawn to Daniel's creativity and free spirit, qualities so different from the cutthroat world of business. Their love was intense, but always behind closed doors. Lorenzo insisted on secrecy because his conservative family from old money in Boston would never accept it, and his business partners were traditional to the core. One day, when the time is right, he always promised Daniel during their stolen weekends in the Hamptons or quiet evenings in this very penthouse. Daniel had moved to New York from California 5 years earlier, chasing his dream of exhibiting his photography in galleries. He worked occasional projects for Harrington Real Estate, shooting promotional images for luxury condos. That gave them a legitimate reason to be seen together in public, but never as lovers. Lorenzo's father, a retired senator, still called every Sunday to ask about finding a nice girl to settle down with. Lorenzo smiled through the calls, the lies sitting heavy in his chest. That particular morning, as Lorenzo opened his email, his world shattered in an instant. A tabloid alert popped up. Harrington Real Estate CEO in secret gay affair. Insider sources claim financial shenanigans too. The article detailed intimate moments only Daniel could know. The way Lorenzo whispered promises in the dark, the vacations they took under fake names, even private texts. Worse, it hinted at fabricated accusations of money laundering in his company's offshore accounts. Lorenzo's heart raced as he read the byline. How could this happen? He dialed Daniel immediately, his voice trembling with rage and fear. "Daniel, what the hell is this?" On the other end, Daniel's voice was calm, but edged with bitterness. "Lorenzo, you left me no choice. You kept me in the shadows for too long. I thought if I forced your hand, you'd finally stand by me." The conversation escalated into accusations that echoed through the empty penthouse. Daniel admitted he had tipped off a reporter, mixing truth with just enough lies to make it sensational. He was tired of being the secret lover, tired of Lorenzo's endless promises that never materialized, tired of watching Lorenzo shake hands with homophobic investors while denying their love. "You said you loved me, but you love your empire more," Daniel said before hanging up. By noon, Lorenzo's phone would not stop ringing. Investors pulled out of a billion-dollar waterfront project. His stock dipped 3% in the first hour. His assistant burst in with printed headlines, her face pale. Lorenzo sat alone at his glass desk, staring at the city skyline he had helped build. The man he loved had just handed his enemies the ammunition to destroy everything. The betrayal burned deeper than any business loss. It was the first crack in the armor he had worn since college, when he first realized he was gay but chose silence to protect his future. Now that silence was screaming back at him, he canceled all afternoon meetings and drove to Daniel's small studio apartment in Brooklyn, the one Lorenzo had secretly helped pay for. The drive across the Brooklyn Bridge felt endless. When Daniel opened the door, his eyes were red from crying. "I never wanted to hurt you like this," he said, but the damage was already spreading like wildfire across every news app. Lorenzo stood there, the man who controlled millions in real estate, suddenly unable to control the one thing that mattered most, the truth of who he was. As the sun set over the East River, Lorenzo returned home alone. The penthouse felt colder than ever. He poured himself a whiskey and replayed every moment of their relationship in his mind. The first kiss in a parked car after the gala. The weekend they spent hiking in Vermont, where Daniel taught him to slow down. The nights Daniel held him when boardroom stress became too much. All of it now weaponized. His chest tightened with a mix of fury and heartbreak. For the first time in his life, Lorenzo Harrington felt truly powerless. And the worst part was that the man who caused it was the same one he still loved. The next morning brought more headlines. His father left a voicemail. "Call me immediately." This cannot be true. Lorenzo stared at the phone, knowing the conversation would be the beginning of the end for more than just his career. The empire he built was cracking, and the foundation was the love he had hidden from everyone, including himself. Lorenzo arrived at Daniel's Brooklyn studio just after sunrise, the early light filtering through the industrial windows lined with black and white prints of New York streets. Daniel was packing a bag, his movements jerky and tense. "You came to yell at me in person?" he asked without turning around. Lorenzo's voice was low and controlled, the same tone he used in hostile takeovers. "You leaked private messages. You invented financial crimes that could land me in federal court. What did you think would happen?" Daniel finally faced him, eyes filled with regret, yet still flashing defiance. "I thought you'd finally choose me." 3 years, Lorenzo. 3 years of hiding in hotels, deleting texts, pretending I was just your photographer. Every time I asked for more, you said soon. I got tired of waiting. The argument spilled into the living room, voices rising until neighbors knocked on the wall. Daniel confessed he had contacted a reporter he met at a gallery opening, feeding her enough details to make the story explosive. The financial rumors were exaggerated to guarantee attention. He never intended them to stick, but once the article went live, he couldn't take it back. "I wanted the world to know I mattered to you," he said, voice breaking. "Instead, I made you hate me." Lorenzo's anger cracked into something raw. He grabbed Daniel's shoulders, not in violence, but desperation. "You were the only person I trusted with everything. My family, my board, my investors. They all see me as the straight golden boy. You knew what coming out would cost me." Daniel pulled away. "And you knew what staying hidden was costing me. I'm not your dirty secret anymore." They stood in silence as the reality settled. The relationship that had felt like freedom was now a cage for both. Lorenzo left without another word, driving back to Manhattan in a daze. By the time he reached his office, 3 major investors had withdrawn from the Hudson Yards project. His legal team was already fielding calls from the SEC. The board scheduled an emergency meeting for that afternoon. At the meeting, the chairman, an old friend of his father, looked at Lorenzo with disappointment. "We can spin the personal part as a misunderstanding, but the financial accusations need to disappear. Take a leave of absence. Let us handle damage control." Lorenzo nodded, but inside he felt the walls closing in. That evening, his father flew in from Boston. The conversation in the penthouse was ice cold. "If this is true, you're throwing away everything our family built. Fix it. Marry a woman if you have to. The company cannot survive this scandal." Lorenzo listened, the weight of generational expectations crushing him. For the first time, he wondered if the empire was worth the lie. Meanwhile, Daniel sat alone in his studio, scrolling through the growing backlash online. Comments called him a gold digger, a liar, a homewrecker. He had thought the truth would set them both free. Instead, it had isolated him completely. Friends distanced themselves, gallery owners canceled shows. The revenge he planned in a moment of pain had boomeranged. Lorenzo spent the night staring at old photos on his phone. Daniel laughing on a sailboat, Daniel cooking pasta in the penthouse kitchen, Daniel holding him after a nightmare about his father's disapproval. The love was still there, buried under layers of betrayal and fear. But love alone could not stop the contracts being canceled or the stock continuing its slide. By midnight, Lorenzo made a decision. He would fight the rumors publicly while privately confronting the truth he had denied for 15 years. The next day brought the first real blow. A key partner in Chicago pulled out of a joint venture worth $200 million, citing reputational risk. Lorenzo sat in his empty office, the city lights mocking him through the glass. The man who once closed deals with a handshake now watched his life's work unravel because the one person he loved chose pain over patience. The following week blurred into a nightmare of conference calls, lawyer meetings, and sleepless nights. Lorenzo's legal team managed to disprove the financial accusations within days, but the damage to public perception was irreversible. Headlines shifted from financial scandal to gay CEO cover-up, and every article included Daniel's name. Old college friends reached out, some supportive, most awkward. His mother cried on the phone, asking why he never trusted her. His father stopped calling altogether. Lorenzo canceled his leave of absence and tried to appear in public as if nothing had changed. He attended a charity gala alone, smiling for cameras while inside, he replayed Daniel's words. "You love your empire more." The truth stung because it was partially accurate. He had chosen safety over authenticity for so long that safety had become his identity. At home, he avoided the penthouse bedroom where he and Daniel had spent countless nights. Instead, he slept on the couch, surrounded by legal briefs and market reports. A supportive colleague, Marcus, a straight ally who had suspected the truth for years, brought coffee one morning. "You don't have to do this alone," Marcus said. "I've got your back in the boardroom." It was the first crack of light in the darkness. Daniel, meanwhile, was drowning in guilt. He tried calling Lorenzo repeatedly, leaving voicemails that went unanswered. He reached out to the reporter, begging her to issue a retraction on the financial part, but the story had already gone viral. His photography work dried up overnight. Rent was due, and the savings he once shared with Lorenzo were gone. In a moment of desperation, he visited Lorenzo's office building but was turned away by security. Lorenzo's internal crisis deepened during a weekend alone in the Hamptons house he and Daniel had once shared. Walking the beach, he confronted the fear that had ruled him since he was 19. The terror of being seen as less than the perfect son, the perfect CEO, the perfect man. The betrayal had stripped away the mask, and what remained was a man who no longer recognized himself. Tears came for the first time in years as he admitted he was gay, not as a secret, but as fact. Back in the city, the board voted to remove him from the CEO position pending a full investigation. The vote was close, but the reputational risk was too great. Lorenzo walked out of the meeting with his head high, but his hands shook. The empire he had built from his grandfather's small construction company was no longer his. Investors who once praised his vision now whispered behind his back. That night, Lorenzo sat on the terrace with a glass of wine, watching the skyline he helped shape. The loss of the company hurt, but the loss of Daniel hurt more. He realized the betrayal was not just about rumors. It was about years of making Daniel feel invisible. The guilt mixed with anger created a storm inside him. For the first time, Lorenzo considered coming out publicly, not for Daniel, but for himself. Isolation became Lorenzo's new normal. He moved into a smaller apartment in Chelsea, away from the penthouse memories. Friends who once filled his calendar now made excuses. His father sent a single email. "Focus on damage control. We can still salvage the family name." Lorenzo read it twice and deleted it. In the quiet evenings, he began therapy with a counselor recommended by Marcus. Session after session, he unpacked the shame he had carried since adolescence. The counselor helped him see that his love for Daniel was never the problem. The secrecy was. Slowly, Lorenzo started journaling, writing letters he never sent to Daniel, to his father, to his younger self. One afternoon, he ran into an old acquaintance at a coffee shop, Ethan, a gay architect who had come out years earlier. Over lattes, Ethan listened without judgment. "The world didn't end when I came out," he said. "It got harder before it got better, but I finally breathed." Lorenzo felt a spark of hope. They exchanged numbers, and soon Ethan introduced him to a small circle of friends who understood the journey. Daniel, living in a friend's spare room, watched from afar. He had taken a part-time job at a cafe to pay bills. Every time he saw Lorenzo's name in the news, guilt tightened in his chest. He wrote a long letter explaining his pain, but never mailed it. Instead, he started volunteering at an LGBT youth center, hoping to turn his mistake into something positive. Lorenzo's first public step came at a small industry event. When asked about the scandal, he answered honestly for the first time. "The personal part is true. I'm gay." The financial claims were false. The room went silent. Then a few people clapped. The moment felt terrifying and liberating. As weeks passed, Lorenzo began consulting on smaller projects, using his expertise without the pressure of the CEO title. He discovered joy in mentoring young developers and volunteering at Habitat for Humanity. The man who once measured success in billions started measuring it in relationships rebuilt. The climax arrived on a rainy Thursday when Daniel finally gathered the courage to show up at Lorenzo's new apartment. Soaked and shaking, he stood in the doorway. "I came to apologize in person. I ruined us and I ruined your career. I was wrong." Lorenzo invited him in. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where they once shared breakfasts. Daniel poured out every regret, the jealousy, the loneliness, the fear that Lorenzo would never choose him. Lorenzo listened, then shared his own awakening. "Your betrayal forced me to stop hiding. I lost the company, but I found myself." The conversation lasted hours. Tears flowed. They acknowledged the love that still lingered but agreed the trust was broken beyond repair. Daniel left with a promise to correct the public record as much as possible. Lorenzo watched him go, feeling the final chapter of their story close. The next morning, Lorenzo held a press conference. He came out fully, took responsibility for the secrecy that fueled the rumors, and announced he was launching a new venture focused on affordable housing with LGBT-friendly designs. The response was mixed. Some investors walked away, but new ones stepped forward, drawn to his authenticity. Daniel watched the conference from the cafe, proud and heartbroken. He knew he had lost the man he loved, but he had helped spark a transformation. 6 months later, Lorenzo's new company, Horizon Homes, broke ground on its first project in Brooklyn. The ribbon-cutting ceremony included Marcus, Ethan, and a small group of supporters. Lorenzo stood taller, no longer hiding. His mother had started speaking to him again. His father remained distant, but sent a quiet note of reluctant respect. Daniel had moved back to California, working as a photographer for an LGBT magazine. They exchanged one final civil email wishing each other well. The betrayal had cost them both dearly, but it had also set them free. Lorenzo walked through the construction site at sunset, the city lights beginning to glow. He thought about the man he used to be and the man he had become. The empire was gone, but in its place stood something stronger, a life lived honestly. Reflecting on Lorenzo and Daniel's journey, betrayal can be the harshest teacher. Lorenzo lost the empire he spent his life building, yet he gained something priceless, freedom to live as his true self. Daniel's desperate act forced a reckoning neither saw coming, teaching both that secrets poison love and revenge only deepens regret. The quiet lesson here is simple. Authenticity isn't a luxury. It's the foundation everything else stands on. When we stop hiding, we stop breaking. Choose truth early, even when it scares you. The empire may change, but the man inside finally gets to breathe.